meteorologist all your life, never see something like this. It would be a disaster of epic proportions. It would be the perfect storm.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Front Row Cinema, a movie podcast for movie lovers by movie lovers. I am your host, as always, CJ Trimboli, and with me is my co-host, sword fishing captain, Mr. James O'Reilly.
How's it going, buddy?
It's going good. We are here again, about to run down another movie. Each week, we run down a movie from my 1,000 movies in theaters, and we see how well it's aged, along with the hype surrounding the film, its box office analysis, and its legacy in the film industry. And Jim, what are we watching tonight?
The Wolfgang Peterson vehicle, The Perfect Storm.
That we are, the Wolfgang Peterson epic disaster movie. A slight addendum. I know I realized I completely messed up last weekend, Jim. I had erroneously stated that we were leaving the 2000s after Gladiator, not realizing that The Perfect Storm was very much a 2000s movie, and I forgot
Yeah,
about a whole slate of 2000s movies we still have to watch. So
maybe
ignore what
maybe
I
the most
said.
2000s movie
Yeah.
ever.
Yes, this is peak 2000s right there. So ignore all of my nonsense from last week. We are still right in the 2000s with this absolutely hilariously over the top semi-biographical disaster film.
Yeah,
And I say
yeah. I'm
very
actually. No, go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go. I was just gonna say I was gonna put semi-biographical in hard quotations there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you about because I'm not gonna lie, I have done very little research into how true the story actually is. I saw that it said it was based on a true story at the beginning, and I turned to my girlfriend and I said, "So like this is all total bullshit then."
Yeah,
Um,
basically.
so yeah, it sounds like you looked into it though. Like what is real about this and what is not.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of research, not a crazy amount. But I learned enough to know that basically the true story is that there were people that died in this hurricane because they went out to do a late season catch and they got caught in the hurricane.
Okay,
But
so like important question
yes,
is did they actually go to a place called the Flemish Cap?
that I have no idea. I would imagine, hopefully, that is a place that does exist because that is a great name for a fishing location.
Yeah, I was very happy that they said it like 8 times in like a very short period of time.
No, but for the most part, it is true. They just do their classic story embellishing. I'll only give one because we'll get to more into it later when we talk about the movie. But like, for instance, in the beginning, when they come back in the beginning of the movie and they have the terrible haul and they've had the last few catches have been crappy and they're just like
Right.
down on their luck, never actually happened. Like
Yeah,
they were
right. It's
just
just something
yeah
to get me invested in these
yeah
people, right?
yeah,
Like, yeah.
it's something to let you know like how desperate they needed like that last big haul that they would risk going out in the storm. But
Right. And
all
so
of that
like
was
it's like the real story is they were just fishing like they normally do and that was
yeah,
right? Like that's it.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. And then also the relationship between the other ship captain, that the girl, Mary Elizabeth Mesh, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, like Mastrantino or something like that. The
Sure.
other,
Has
yeah,
she
the
been
other
in anything else? I think that's the first
Yeah,
I've seen her. She
she
didn't
was in
stick
the
out
she
to
was in
me.
the Abyss. She
Oh,
was big in the
okay.
80s. Like she was in Scarface.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so she was big in the 80s. Her relationship with George Clooney's character, they were in real life, they were like passing friends. Like they were like, "Hey, Skipper, how's it like?" They're like in the movie, they're just like signaling each other like left and right, like giving these
Yeah.
great catchisms like all the time. Like
Which is another interesting one. I guess they're like everybody on the boat kind of had something grounding them back to like the real world. So I wonder if they were just like George Clooney needs like somebody to care about.
because other than that, he's mostly just like a big lone wolf in this movie. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's yeah. So yeah, but for the most part, yes, and especially true of any movie you see. If it says based on a true story, you could completely disregard everything you're about to watch and realize it's
Yeah,
all
right? I mean
Hollywood nonsense.
Fargo is like the famous one where they just like wrote that at the beginning of the movie and like it wasn't even based on anything.
Yeah, it was just completely
Like,
made up. It's like that's just classic Hollywood right there. But it works because you need that in movies. Like if they were just like, we were just going fishing, like it does take away from it. Like it's
Yeah, I
you need
mean,
that Hollywood schmaltz.
I don't want to like jump too far ahead here, but yeah, I think that like at the end of the day, this is a movie about some guys died on a fishing boat, and that's really not that interesting. So
Yeah,
like they
yeah,
need to like
exactly.
do
You
something
you
to.
need to put that Hollywood pizzazz in there where you can, and at least get some bit of a story basis there. So it makes sense the stuff that they did there. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We like to start with our warm-ups, our pre-workout before we get to our big
Yeah,
movie here. And
yeah.
that is what we remember about seeing this movie. And I know for this one, for Jim, you do not have one. This was your first time watching The Perfect Storm.
Yeah, I've never seen it before. I've obviously heard of it. Like I remember it being like a movie that a lot of people did see at this time when it came out. Um, and I vaguely remember that they all died, but that I didn't remember until I saw it happen in this one, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's totally what's supposed to happen in that
That's
movie.
right. They all died. Now I heard you said before, when you were watching with your girlfriend. Had she seen it before?
I don't think so. I think it
Uh,
was the first time she'd seen it as
First.
well, and I don't know if I could say she's seen it now because she walked out like
In
about
it.
an hour in.
There we go. It was like, that's enough George Clooney fishing for me.
Yeah, she was not a fan of the movie. She did not enjoy it.
It is a very particular movie to be a fan of. You really got to be a fan of the genre to really get suckered into one of these ones. I know
Yeah.
Heather didn't watch it with me when I watched it this time for the podcast, but I do know Heather does love this movie because she has made me watch it with her in the
Yeah, and
past.
she's a big Mark Wahlberg fan,
Yes, and
right?
yes,
I
she is a
think
big Mark
so.
Wahlberg fan, so naturally this is a movie we were going to come back
Right,
to. And
right.
and I and
Which
I I enjoy Mark Wahlberg from time to time in the right movie.
yeah, no, I mean especially back then. I'm gonna look up really fast his filmography because I'm
Well, that
trying to
was
get a feel
definitely
for like where was Mark Wahlberg at as a star at this
when he
point.
made this movie. Well, yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
he had done. I mean, he was definitely a star, but he wasn't quite like of the power that he has. Like I think by 2000, like he had done Boogie Nights, he had done
right.
Fear. I think Three Kings was before this.
Okay, yeah,
So
Three Kings was
yeah,
another one like that. I think ended up kind of ultimately was pretty forgettable,
yeah,
but at the time it was kind of a big deal just
big
based on who was
deal.
in it.
Yeah, but those
Oh
were
yeah, and he did the Basketball Diaries in '95.
yeah. So he had some ones under the belt, and how can we forget the star power of his band, the Funky Bunch? Like
Yeah,
this
right.
man,
Well, that's what I mean though.
this
Like,
man was at the top of his
there's like
game.
a there's a point that we really only saw the tail end of, right? Where like he was like at one point was like a kind of goofy white rapper, and then all of a sudden became a movie star. And
Yeah,
I don't know about you, but for me, I basically only remember him as a movie star.
yeah. No, I don't think I even knew that he sang that song until we were much older. Like I remember that song from when we were kids, but I don't think I ever as a kid put two and two together that it was like, oh yeah, like that's Mark Wahlberg until like
Right.
way later in the game when we got older. So yeah, same for me. I only remember him mostly as an actor. So
I'm
never
also. Do you see what his next credit is after the Perfect Storm?
oh, I know what it
I
is
have a
because
feeling that's
it's
like
a
on an upcoming
movie.
episode,
Yeah,
right?
it's a movie we're going to be watching very soon.
Oh, I'm excited. I definitely saw that one in
Yeah,
theaters.
and I'm excited. We won't spoil the surprise just yet, but I am excited to watch that movie because that is a movie that I only watched that one time in theaters. So that's
Yeah.
going to be a movie that I'm
I think
very much revisiting for the first time in a long
we
time.
might be the
So
first people ever to watch that movie twice.
yeah,
It's definitely possible.
the first people putting themselves through it for the podcast
Right, right.
to
Because
watch.
anybody who's seen it once would be wise enough to not watch it a second time. Except us, I guess.
Yeah, except us who want to put ourselves through the pain of rewatching that seminal 2001 classic.
Yeah. But you're right. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. If anybody actually cares, I'm sure they've already figured it out.
Yeah, I figured it out which
But
one it is, but
we
they'll
won't
get
give it
there.
away just yet.
We won't. I, however, of course, I did see this movie in theaters. So, I this is actually, funnily enough, you'll enjoy this. This movie was the first date I ever went on.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
that's pretty big.
yeah. And I remember it was a girl from my elementary school.
Yeah, is this
And
anybody I know?
no, I don't think she went to division. We did not stay in touch or anything after that. But yeah, I remember my
So the date
mom.
didn't go so good, it
The
sounds
date did
like.
not go so. No, the date went fine, but I don't think I really cared that much about a second one back when you're like, well, we were like 11 years old in
I
2000.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah. So I was
that's
just like, yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I was
So
like,
what do
that's
you
fun.
wait? What do you remember about the date? Like anything at all, or?
So I remember my mom, picks we go to pick her up, and my mom was just like, "Oh, you're gonna be so cute," like made me sit in the back seat so that I would sit
Oh
with
my
so that we
god!
would we would sit together in the car going and like just make really awkward small talk.
Did you
And then
get
I
out and open the door for her? Like, did you
no,
guys
no,
pick
no,
her
I
up?
didn't. No, we my mom picked her up. I didn't get out of the car. We
Oh
just
my
let her
god,
come in and
dude.
get in the car. Chivalry was dead by that point, Jim. All right, I wasn't getting out of the car.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
clearly on your dates anyway.
yeah, clearly, this is probably why there wasn't a second one. And then I remember we bought three. My mom had to go to the movies with us, obviously, because you can't just drop two 11-year-olds off at the movies and be like, all right, I'll see you guys
Yeah,
later.
right,
So my mom
right.
took us to
Which
the
was
movies.
this? Was this rated R? Let me double check that too.
No, I think it was PG-13.
Okay, so you like yeah,
Pretty,
but even still, you were like 11. You
yeah,
probably
but
could have
still,
gone in, but also not ill advised.
yeah. So we sat, and then she sat 2 rows behind us so that we could kind of like have our
Oh
own space
wow,
and everything. Yeah,
that's not very much space at all, though.
not very much space at all, but I don't think she really had to worry about two 11-year-olds like doing any canoodling in the perfect storm. And if
Yeah,
there
right,
was,
right.
it never crossed my mind because I am one of those people. Even as a kid, I've always been one of those people where like if I'm watching a movie with a girl and I've been like this my entire life, like I'm not Netflix and chilling anything. Like if a movie's on, I'm watching it. Like I
Yeah,
have I have lost dates with girls many times because we've put on a movie and they've tried to start making out and I would have been like, "What are you kidding me? Like we're watching a movie."
yeah. I think it would depend on the movie for me. Like if it was a movie that I was really into, I would probably agree with you. Yeah, but that's commitment to do that for every
I am,
movie.
yeah, no, it's commitment. It doesn't matter if I've never seen the movie and it's on. I was like, listen, if you wanted to make out, you should have put something on that I've seen already. Like this is your fault. Like
Yeah.
so I've always been like that. So she didn't have to worry during
Like
the
so
perfect
like hold on
storm.
though. Let's
Yeah.
say it was your first time watching All About Steve.
Oh man.
Would you interrupt that? Like probably, right? That movie's terrible.
I don't know. It was terrible, but at the same time, like I gotta give a movie its due, man. I gotta
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like, and also I'd probably just be like way too angry at everything to like focus on anything else, you know?
It's true. Like the movie would make you so pissed off that I'd be like, I can't even think about kissing right now. You gotta relax.
But okay, so yeah, first date, your mom's chaperone.
Yeah, mom chaperoned the first date. We watched this movie. I remember really enjoying it as a kid. And then I remember my mom taking us home. And here is another classic TJ experience that many ladies have gotten from me. She pulled into the girl's driveway, and my mom was nice enough to give the cue where she wasn't looking if I wanted to give the girl like a kiss goodnight.
Oh
But
my god.
Eminem's The Real Slim Shady came on in the car. And instead of leaning in to kiss her, I was like, all right, have a good night. And then just started jamming along to the music because I cared more about the song at that point.
Yeah, oh
And so,
yeah.
and
You
then
were
so,
definitely just nervous. You were looking for
oh
any
no,
distraction.
I'm sure that I was nervous. But what's hilarious is that I was not the only time that that's happened. I remember another time years later, obviously when we were adults at this point, and we were out at a bar drinking, and I had met this girl, and we hit it off, and we took a cab together back to her place. And as we were pulling up to
And the
her,
real Slim Shady came on.
no, it would be amazing if that was that again. But no, as we were pulling up to her place and we were making out in the back seat, Muse had just put out a new album at this point, and
Oh,
and
okay.
the cab driver was playing it. And it came on, and I immediately forgot all about the girl and just started talking to the cab driver about how good that new album was. To the
Yeah,
point that when
yeah.
we pulled up and I went to get out of the car with her, she just slammed the door shut on me
Oh
and
man.
just left.
Yeah. What Muse album was it?
I think the funny thing now is I don't even remember what album it was because I was just hammered drunk.
Turns out neither thing was that important.
Yeah, yeah, right. But I do remember the cab driver taking me home and then him parking in front of my house for like 20 minutes while we just listened to the album and talked about it. And it's
That's
one of
pretty
my
rad.
favorite like experiences because I'm just like it's so silly. And the silver lining on it is that I don't even remember what album it was.
Yeah.
But those that was my glorious experience going to see The Perfect Storm, my first date ever. But what a glorious time it was. What a movie to pick for the first date, right? The Perfect Storm.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I was also 11 at the time, so maybe take this with a grain of salt, but it seems like it'd be a good date movie just from like the outside looking in.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it had everything that the girl would want. It had some hot Mark Wahlberg, George Clooney at the top of his game, some
Yeah.
top notch effects, and some sweet like disaster action for the guys. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. It
it's
seemed
an
like
all
it would have
around
been
smash
a
right there,
good date
especially in the
movie.
early 2000s. But I was definitely a fan of this movie back when it came out. We're gonna dive into it pretty soon, and we'll see if those thoughts have held up. But first, before we dive into that, as always, Jim, we'd like to and love to take a look and see what these movies' box office performance was. So hit me with some glorious numbers for The Perfect Storm.
All right. So it opened number one, um, beating out the Mel Gibson movie The Patriot.
God damn it. To think I could have taken her on a date movie to The Patriot and we settled for The Perfect Storm.
The Patriot was like really long, if I remember correctly, right?
I think it's like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that was a really good movie. But
Yeah, yeah.
I guess
It's
you haven't seen that one in theaters, huh? That's not
I
coming
did
up.
unfortunately I did not get to see The Patriot in theaters.
Yeah, but so it beat out the Patriot. It made 41.3 million its opening weekend,
Solid opening
which
weekend for that.
yeah, I mean I feel like that was really respectable back then for sure.
Oh, sure.
Um
And I mean what, back then, 15 of those dollars is coming from yours truly.
yeah, and so like to put it in perspective, right? Third highest 4th of July opening weekend at the time,
It's
behind
crazy.
two Will Smith movies. Can you give me the two Will Smith movies?
I mean, at this point, it's the 2000s. That's got to be pretty easy. Like Independence Day, clearly up there. It's the best 4th of July movie ever made.
Yeah, I mean, right. Yes, so that is one of them. And
And then
then
the
yeah,
other
I
one,
mean, this is kind of a layup, right? Like,
yeah,
there's the
yeah,
two
it's
like really really popular Will Smith
Will Smith
movies.
movies. Yeah, because he owned like the summer there. And in the 90s, like there was still few and far between of them because it's like it's not Enemy of the State, like
Yeah, right. Like
it's not Wild Wild West. Like
he's
it's
about to go
obviously
on a run
yeah.
of big like box office movies, but
So
it's
like
still kind of early on.
it's definitely Men in Black.
Yeah, yeah, you got it.
Yeah, of course, of course. But still,
Uh
like that's crazy that third highest opening was The Perfect Storm at the time.
Right.
Like,
It's
Fourth of
right.
July.
And so like that 41.3 million sounds like I don't know, actually it might be pretty good for some movies these days. But it sounds kind of low, but when you put it into that context of like at the time this is the third highest ever 4th of July, the biggest box office maybe after except like Memorial Day, right? Um third highest ever with 41.3 million. So pretty respectable.
Yeah, that's nothing to
And then it
sneeze at.
finished 328.7 million worldwide. That's 182 domestic and 146 international.
So that's not bad.
Yeah, yeah.
For a movie of that caliber, like 328, it's respectable. Especially
Yeah,
because
it's
like I would
definitely a
imagine for
success.
2000s, like it couldn't have cost that much to make that movie.
Yeah, I have it here that the budget was 120 million,
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yeah,
which
right there.
again probably doesn't include marketing, but it's like you're probably this is a success this movie.
And also like I doubt this movie was on the level of some of the other movies that we've touched on in terms of marketing. You know, like
Yeah, I
where
think
we've looked at like Star Wars and Lost World that are spending
oh
like
yeah.
hundreds of millions. Like this
Right.
movie, how much could they possibly have spent on marketing? Like an extra 20 maybe?
Right. Definitely not as much as Jurassic Park. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I do remember the trailer for this movie, like back when we were kids being out, because I remember like being like, oh shit, like that scene where they're like gonna try and go over the big giant wave, and I was like, dude, gotta see that movie. Like that looks pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Like that looks pretty cool. Surprisingly, one of the things that I guess I shouldn't have been shocked to see, but I was a little bit shocked to see as I was doing research for this movie, was that it is technically an Academy Award nominated movie. I
Yeah,
was
I can.
very, I mean, visual effects, yeah, definitely. That seems like a easy
Yeah,
layup for that movie to make. I did not expect it to get sound. But I mean, with all the hurricane and everything in there, I guess it makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
And then
This
funnily
was
enough,
this was an interesting one for me for effects too, because
yeah,
like I don't none of them stood out to me as like really, really spectacular, I guess. But then I'm just wondering if like at the time they would have been like mind blowing. And
yeah, well,
part of why they're so good is because they're kind of invisible. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think it's definitely one of those ones when you're watching it where you have to put yourself in the mindset of in 2000 when this came out, like that's pretty good, like
Yeah,
for
I
that
mean
era.
Academy Award nominated
Yeah,
level. You know?
this is true. Like we're definitely been beat over the head with special effects these days. That seeing a tsunami or just the hurricane like setting seems so pedestrian in comparison. But at the time, that was a really huge, especially for disaster movies. Like outside of like Independence Day, back then, you really weren't getting
Yeah,
these crazy special effects driven disaster movies. So this was
yeah. No,
huge
that's true.
to really get in the thick of it and be able to conceptualize grander set pieces. Funnily enough, this movie lost both its awards to last week's movie.
Oh, the
Yeah,
Gladiator.
both lost the Gladiator.
Nice. Yeah, well deserved for
Yeah, well
Gladiator
deserved for
again.
Gladiator. So, but hey, I mean, a nomination is solid for Perfect Storm for both of those things. I don't think they should have won either, but
Yeah,
definitely.
this definitely feels like the kind of movie that had so much star power in it and did so well at the box office that it just seemed like it had to get nominated for like a couple things, right? Like
Or
there's
something.
no way
Yeah.
they were going to totally leave it out.
Yeah. Like it was a hit with the audiences to the point where they were like, we got to at least give it a little love. And visual effects, easiest department for a
Yeah, and
movie
it's
like
got I mean,
this.
it's a George Clooney movie. He's like the biggest star in the world at this point, right? Like
Is he? Is he really like at that
I
George
I
Clooney height yet at this point? Like I
I
feel
mean,
like
maybe this isn't his peak, but he's pretty popular at this point.
he's definitely on the uptick at this point. Because you got to remember, like he's only like at this point 2 or 3 years removed from Batman and Robin.
Yeah, but how far removed from ER is he?
Well, was he still on ER when he did Batman and Robin, or had he
I
left at
have
that
no
point?
idea. I don't
That's yeah.
know.
I don't know. I don't know when he left. I don't know how long he was on ER for.
I just know when he was on ER, I think it was safe, like it was fair to say he was one of the bigger stars in the world. Like he was on like
He
People's Sexiest Man Alive a bunch of times. Like
That's true. That's true. But I feel like for that he was more TV. Like he wasn't like a bona fide movie star yet.
yeah, this might have been like in his like
Yeah, his
transition into
transition as
movie
he was.
stardom.
Yeah, because I would say probably around like Ocean's 11 is really where he started to like hit
I
that
mean,
groove.
that's not
Which
too long after 2000, is it?
no, it is the next year. So like I think this movie probably helped put him on the path. I guess the
Yeah,
question
let's.
is what did he
Oh, and
do?
he was in Three Kings also.
Okay, yeah, so that's where. But that yeah, I don't know if that movie really did much love for him.
No, but
And
I just remember that it was a big deal, like because he was in it. He was in the Thin Red Line in '98.
yeah, that's a movie
Um,
everyone knows.
he was in Out of Sight in '98. Have you ever seen that
Oh
movie?
yeah, that's a good movie. I like that movie.
That's another Steven
Yeah,
Soderbergh movie.
that's a Soderbergh movie.
You brought up Ocean's 11.
Ocean's
Yeah,
11. So he was putting in the work. He was putting in the legwork to get himself back up there. So this is probably I would say the perfect storm is probably where he was really capitalizing on what makes him work in his star power. Because
yeah,
this is a perfect vehicle for him. Like he gets to be like
yeah.
a salty seaman and like everyone's like look at how like he's just the everyman. He's just a good looking everyman. Like
Yeah, I mean, so are we getting into? It sounds like we're about to step into what we
Oh
liked
yeah,
and
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
like
I think
territory,
we're
right?
about, yeah, I think we're definitely
Okay.
ready to dive in
So,
here now.
so
And
you liked Clooney in this movie? It sounds like.
so one of my favorite things about movie stars at times is I'm a very big classical movie kind of guy. And what I mean by that is I love the stars of yesteryear. You know, your Cary Grants, your Humphrey Bogarts,
Right.
all those guys, because they just brought their star power was in just how good they brought their charisma into the performance instead of what we see today where it's very much the performance that, like, they want more actors today want to disappear into the role instead
Right.
of bring themselves into that. And you see both versions in this movie where you have someone like Diane Lane who shows up and is like, I'm going to do the most Boston accent you've ever heard in your life. And
Yeah,
then
she
you
had
have
a
George,
couple of good
yeah,
Boston hits in
yeah.
there for
And
sure.
then you have George Clooney who shows up and he goes, I don't give a fuck about that at all. And literally just plays George Clooney.
Yeah, which is like it's such an interesting choice to make in a movie, but I guess the point is like he's not necessarily from Boston originally, right? Like he's from Florida. So like it like I
But
guess it kind of makes sense. But then again, it seems like he's been there for quite a while. So
that he'd at least get like a little twang, but like he doesn't give a fuck whatsoever. Like he's like, nope, I'm George Clooney in this movie. This is what you want. This is what I'm
yeah.
giving you. And
Well,
it
right, because
works.
that's the
Yeah,
thing. Nobody wants to watch George Clooney fail at a Boston accent for two
exactly.
hours. No shot.
Exactly.
And like
And
honestly, I don't even necessarily want to watch him be good at a Boston accent for 2 hours. Like I'm fine with him just sounding like himself. Yeah.
exactly. And I love it too. But also like a lot of the other actors too. Cause like you don't really hear one from like John C. Riley or like William Fichtner or like any of the other guys. It's really
Yeah.
just
I
like
mean,
Mark Wahlberg and Diane Lane who are like so heavy in it that I guess
yeah.
like you don't even like
Well,
it makes
Mark
it more.
Wahlberg can't help it. Let's be
Yeah, well,
honest. That's just
he's
how
from.
Mark Wahlberg talks.
Well, one of my favorite notes that I wrote down that had me cracking up was that I was like, why is Diane Lane doing a better Boston accent than Mark Wahlberg?
I don't know, dude. I feel like she was hamming it up pretty hard.
She is, but like it kind of works for me at the same time. I'm like, she just like she felt like how like she felt exactly how I would
Yeah.
picture an arrogant Boston person to like sound like. She just had that
Yeah,
like,
that's I could see that. I just I would also say she wasn't the worst part of the movie, so I didn't really pay too much attention to her Boston accent or lack thereof or like very obvious presence of. I
well,
wasn't
I
really
mean,
like it didn't stick out to me, I guess.
well, they also have like the more like less to play around with because their whole thing in the whole movie is like you're just gonna hang out at the bar and look sad.
Yeah. Right.
Like that's all they do for the whole movie, all of them. Like she just looks
Which
out the window forlornly for like the entire movie.
right, which you're kind of getting into something that would very much be on the don't like list for me. And it ties into something you were saying earlier about how they had to really Hollywood up this movie to make it like a watchable movie that wasn't just about guys in a boat that capsized.
Yeah.
Um, so this movie has a beginning. It sets up a lot of characters and sets up, like the things that are tying them to this town and like why they desperately need this money and that they desperately need this money. And it has an end where all the guys die. The problem is the middle of the movie is they just fish in a storm for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And like they constantly need to come up with ways to make that interesting. And everything they're doing is so over the top and ridiculous that I hate every second of it. I'm like not invested whatsoever.
I think he did a little too much in like padding out the runtime that I think it would have been better stripped down because everything is else that they do outside of the shipping vessel is so unnecessary. Like, and I get it. Like, yeah, we got to cut back to Diane Lane and them, so they're looking sad, wondering like, "Are my boys gonna make it?" So that we know that there's people waiting for them at home. But like, there's a reason why when Chief Brody and them went out to go kill Jaws, we don't keep cutting back to people on Amity Island. It's because we
Well,
don't give a fuck anymore.
right, right. We don't need to know what's going on there. We don't
Yeah.
care. But that's what I'm saying though. The middle of the movie is so lacking any juice or meat on the bone that they need filler stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just I'm bored. Like I can't watch these guys sail in a storm for literally an hour. I can't do it.
Well, yeah, because
And like that's what they were asking me to do, you know.
it definitely needed, I think, a run in the editing room because this movie clocks in at just over 2 hours, and
Yeah, it was
it's
like 2 hours and what, like four
I think like
minutes or 5 minutes
yeah,
or something like that.
and you definitely feel it at times. Another subplot that I think could have just been gutted from this entire movie is the like small shipping vessel that Karen Allen and the warden from Shawshank Redemption are on. And
Right.
they just like got caught in and like every time we cut to them, I'm just like, why? Who are these people? Like, what do they have to do with anything else in the story? And I get it. They were actual people that got caught in this storm, and you're trying to tell, a complete history of it. But at the same time, you're not, you don't care about the facts. So why don't just cut them out of the movie entirely?
Because there's no meat to the middle of the movie. So they're like, okay, guys, we need to like juice this up a bit. Let's just like throw somebody else into the same storm so we can cut to them doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
But I feel like you could have, if you got rid of that subplot, found better ways to then juice up your middle at least. Because I feel like that's where
yeah,
you should be sticking your focus is just on this main shipping crew and
right.
finding whatever ways you can to juice up that stuff. Because every
Well, and
time you
like,
cut to other people, I'm like, I don't care. I don't
yeah,
care.
so okay, so for example, right? This movie reminds me a lot of another disaster movie that I know we saw in theaters at some point. Um, this movie reminds me a lot of Everest, where you have kind of like the all-star cast and you're kind of getting a glimpse into this really like niche culture, right? In Everest, it's climbers, and in this movie, it's these fishermen. The difference between this movie and Everest is in this middle part that we're talking about. There's guys climbing Mount Everest, which
Yeah.
is like way cooler than whatever these guys are doing.
Yeah. Then just like
Like
fishing.
it's an actually like a lofty goal that's hard to achieve in and of its own right before the
Yeah.
disaster ever gets there.
Although to play devil's advocate here, Jim,
Yeah.
they do manage at some points to have some gripping moments for me in that middle chunk. One of the ones that I really enjoyed is the scene when John C. Riley gets hooked and ripped
Oh
right
yeah.
into the water. And William Fichtner's character, who the two of them hate each other's guts for the majority of this movie, he dives in to save them. I will say that had some good moments of tension to it, and I really like the way that they shot it. So to play devil's advocate, I think that one holds up pretty well there in the middle chunk of the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, and I mean there was like some good like individual parts that you can look at and say, okay, yeah, that was a cool scene, you know?
Yeah, but
And
as a
I agree
whole,
with you. The scene when he got dragged into the water and they're like jumping in the water to save him, and like you said, it's the guy that he's been at odds with the whole time they're on the boat. Um, but like the part that I don't like about it is that that's not really tying into any bigger whole here. You know what I mean? Like, um, the conflict between those guys is so fabricated. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? Like it's literally based on nothing at all. Um, I don't really like know very much about who those people are when they fall in the water. I don't particularly care if any of them live or die like when they fall in the water.
this
Um,
this movie is very much a movie where characterization is perfunctory. Like they're like, listen, here is the surface level characters. You got your skipper, you got his right hand man. He's in love with the girl back home. You got two
yeah.
dudes that hate each other. Like it's very surface level because Wolfgang knows what you're there for. He's just like, you just want to see shit get fucked up.
Yeah, and
the,
like
the
so
his
like
his the problem is that you got to wait like an hour and 40 minutes before like you start to get to that stuff.
yeah, I think I clocked it. It starts raining at about an hour into the movie. That's when like the first sign of rain shows up.
Yeah, so like what you're really looking for in a movie like this is in just a roller coaster ride of an onslaught of dudes trying to survive a hurricane.
Yeah, and so like in that middle section, it does succeed at that a couple of times. And like one of the times you're pointing out is when John C. Riley falls in. Um I think there was like a scene, honestly, the helicopter rescue scene where they're trying to get Karen Allen and the warden from Shawshank out of their boat was pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
like interesting to watch anyway. Um so like it does succeed at a couple of those, but again, like I just don't care either because they're these like weird ancillary side characters that even you think shouldn't even be in the movie. Or like it's all just so like lame and made up that
Yeah.
I
I think
don't care about it.
it's
And
one of
then
those movies.
the other thing I would say, the
Yeah.
music absolutely steps on every single one of those moments. It never feels right.
Uh, it's one of those movies we do talk so much about how important music is, and it says a lot that I couldn't tell you one like theme or motif from that soundtrack that stands out in here or helps accentuate any given scene.
Yeah, there was never a point where I was watching where I was like, where one, I didn't notice the music, which would be like good, right? If it just kind of blended in and just amplified what I was feeling from what I was watching, that's great.
Yeah.
Or like you said, it never really stood out as anything that was spectacular or was like really grabbing my attention. It always just stood out as something like, man, this doesn't seem to really be like this scene. This music doesn't sound like what I should be listening to right now. It's
It
like
never
weird and
rises up.
airy and orchestral, and I hate it.
Yeah. It never rises up to the occasion of the scene. It's almost like background noise at that
Yeah,
point.
it's
Like it's just there because we need music there.
yeah, and it's always this like uplifting, like it always feels like the music that should be playing when something resolves,
Yeah.
not when something is like still up in the air and like tense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's very much a movie that doesn't know really what it wants to be because it wants, you know, it's got these surface level characters because it knows what you're there for is the thrilling action scenes of surviving this hurricane. But then it wants to drag that out and show you all of this pseudo backstory stuff of your characters to build up to that. But it's like you can't be both of those things. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You either want to be that big over the top dumb spectacle or you want to be like Titanic where you're building up your characters up to this looming disaster that's coming. But this movie bungles every attempt to try
Yeah.
and
I mean, right. It's
yeah,
nothing like Titanic. It's nothing
exactly.
like Titanic,
Exactly.
even
And
though
that's
it should be a lot like Titanic.
yeah, yeah. But I think its problem is that it's just like it was never going to be as grandiose as a Titanic, so you kind of have to pivot to a way to make it more where it's like a stripped down actiony movie, but
Yeah.
they don't do that either because you're spending all this time of build up that never really pays off in the way that you want it to pay off.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it does kind of pay off to me. A lot of what they set up in the beginning, I feel like pays off. Because again, like, this is a movie where they started with the ending and they said everybody dies. Like, how do we make that moment, like, have some feeling behind it?
Yeah.
And it does. Like, when they die, like, it's sad. You know what I mean? Like, I was definitely, like, feeling it. Um, but yeah, it's just like I don't know. So like I think it does pay off in a way, but it doesn't pay off like consistently and thoroughly throughout the movie. It just kind of like pays off to this, very predictable conclusion that I'm like kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. So it's just like they die. Great. Like,
It's one of those movies that very much leaves you noticing all of the manipulative moves that a story should make to get you to feel something. And
yeah.
not so much like a good story does all those, but it's so invisible to you that you don't notice how swept up into it you're being. Whereas in this movie, it's so on the nose and not subtle that you can't get swept up in it as much as you want to because you're noticing it so much. Like the scene that gets me every time where you're supposed to like feel sad, but I just laugh is whenever like when they're underneath and George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg are like, no, let's get out of here. And you see like like you see George Clooney go to get out,
Yeah,
but then just slowly float himself back in. And it's just
yeah,
like that is so fucking silly. Like,
yeah. Well, the part that I didn't get is why Mark Wahlberg thinks that they can just get out.
yeah, right. Like
like,
he's just like, let's get out of
like
here. It's like, and go where, bro? You're in the middle of the ocean. Like,
yeah. And then I guess it dawns on him eventually that like there's like 150-foot waves surrounding him on all sides.
you don't even have a fucking life vest.
Yeah, and he just kind of was like waiting with them.
Yeah.
Like it's like, can you really ride waves like that? It feels like he would have died a lot quicker.
Yeah, like that would have just swept him up immediately instead of him just like floating along with it.
Yeah.
But like,
At least he didn't have to go home to his surprise house and mortgage.
yeah, right, dude. You really skated by on that one,
Could
fishing the
you
rest of your
imagine
life
if
to pay
somebody
off
sent
that
you a letter
mortgage.
and it was like, I bought us a house?
I'd be
You'd
like,
be
the
like, what?
fuck you did?
And you didn't think to ask me about that?
Yeah, right. Be like, what are the taxes like?
Yeah, yeah, right. Like, there's a lot to think about here.
But yeah, it's one of those movies that really hones you in on how manufactured they are. So you really can't get swept in it. Like another scene is when like what's his name? I think it's John C. Riley who's got the kid, and they're about
Yeah,
to die, and he's like, "This is gonna be really hard on my little boy." It's like, shut the fuck up,
yeah,
like
terrible. Yeah,
like
horrible,
yeah, horrible dialogue, and not even the
horrible.
type of dialogue that like it's not even like bad like good bad dialogue. Like it's
No,
bad.
it's
Yeah,
bad, and like it's also the thing he has to say though, because it's literally the only thing I know about him is that he has a kid. That's it.
yeah,
Like, you know what
exactly.
I mean?
And like, and the movie hasn't done enough subtle story structure for you to just like know, like, oh, it's gonna be hard on his kid. Like, no, they got it. It's such on the nose dialogue where like he has to
Right,
spell it out. This is what you should be feeling. This is gonna be hard on my little
right.
boy. You should be
It's like,
sad.
hey, I know I haven't spoken to this kid for the last hour and a half, and he's only been on screen for 35 seconds. But remember, I have a kid. Like,
They're like, don't you forget it.
yeah. So I don't know. It was just so bad, dude. It was so bad.
Well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate again here, because even though we are harping on so much stuff,
Yeah,
I
and I
did
mean,
I
feel free to stand up to me. I hated it, but I'm definitely willing to listen to other
oh no, no,
opinions.
that's fair. That's I any person that doesn't enjoy it, I can totally understand it. And I'm not, gonna sit on the soapbox now and be like, here's all the good stuff about it. I will say though that the last 30 minutes or so of the movie is pretty solid. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Like once they get into the stuff that you're waiting for and the stuff that you came and bought a ticket to see, which is these guys try and survive this insane perfect storm.
Yeah.
I was pretty interested. I enjoyed that. Like the scene where they have to go out and cut the anchor off and they gotta like go out with like the welding torch
Oh
and
yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
like yeah, and they're just going through these
Right.
insane waves and
And
like
like the
that
mast
stuff.
of the boat is
Yeah,
swinging like either
yeah.
direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going nuts. Like that stuff, like I was into that. And again, like it is all surface level stuff. It's pretty much just getting me at, oh, big waves. Oh, he's got
Yeah.
that's cool. I like that. Like,
No, I'm like, but you're right. It is delivering on the premise in a way. It is
yeah,
like this is why you went to see that movie.
yeah. Like for the stuff that I bought the ticket for, when they finally deliver me the stuff that I paid for, it's pretty fucking good. So
Yeah.
I gotta give it credit for at least living up to the portion of the movie that I wanted the whole movie to be.
Yeah, and that's fair. The only other critique I would have that speaks to what you were just talking about is like the pacing of this movie was rough. Uh it if I could like describe it for a second, like you said before, there's a lot of build up in that first like half hour, 45 minutes. A lot of character work, which somehow still doesn't add much depth at all. It's just 45 minutes of like really shallow setup that takes a long time. Uh and it's slow, which I don't have a problem with a movie being slow. at all. Like I think if a movie is slow and done well, it's really fun to watch. Um, but so like it's slow and it's kind of setting stuff up, and then once it starts raining again, about an hour in, it doesn't really let up. It gets like really bad really fast, and then for like another 45 minutes I'm literally just watching two groups of people sail in a storm. Like, and it's like you said, there's like a lot of crazy things happening while they're doing that. There's people falling into the water, there's masks swinging around, but I never really felt like I got any breather. And at some point it all just became like noise, you know what I mean? Like I was just like exhausted by it, and
Yeah.
like none of it looked any different than any other of it. And I was like, geez, this has been going on for like literally like 45 minutes to an hour, and I just have no bearings anymore. Like it's just been wild.
Yeah, it's
um
definitely a movie that suffers from its just random pacing of here's the first half that's a really slow build up, and then here's the second half that's balls to the walls, where I think this movie would have done much better if you could still have your opening. Like I'd say act one of them, us meeting our surface level characters is fine. But I think they should really truncate that middle of the movie so that the whole second half of that movie, once they're out there, is them surviving that storm. So you can kind of have those breaks in the action where it's like the storm starts up. It's not so bad in the beginning. They have a few things that, like a few obstacles they got to get over, but it's nothing they can't handle. It makes them lower their guard to think they can get through this storm. And with
yeah,
each obstacle they come across, it starts to ramp up more and more. But it gives us that moment where you can let more of these obstacles breathe instead of having a situation where it's like, oh, here's this, and this that they got to all do really quickly. And then we cut to the small little vessel, and oh my God, it flipped over like three times. Like they got to do this,
yeah.
and this.
Like you brought up Jaws earlier, right? um that I would say, comparing this to Jaws does a really good job of putting in those moments to breathe when they're on the boat.
Yeah.
There's still action and they're still chasing the shark, but that's a thing that's happening over the course of days. And in those days, there's moments where we're drinking and we're just like swapping sailor stories. You know what I mean?
We're learning
And there's
about that through
humanity to
these.
all this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the
Um,
problems with Perfect Storm is that they do all of that before the storm happens,
right,
and
exactly.
it just doesn't work at all.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And like you said, it's like these are the parts of the movie that I came to see, and the way you're giving them to me are not good for me. I don't like it. Like, and if I don't like these parts, you're really in trouble because that's
Yeah,
like what this
exactly.
whole movie is about. If I could change any one thing,
Hmm.
um I would say like they really need to hone in on the fact that the world of this movie is these guys on this one fishing boat, and just stay there for the whole movie basically.
I know.
You
I,
you know
I
if you're going to just set up these really like ultimately shallow connections to the mainland, you might as well not set them up at all, or set them up like, in very small ways on the boat. Like I think if this is a movie that's like more of like a thriller that takes place on that boat, I care about it a lot more.
yeah, I was literally just going to echo that sentiment. I think where this movie succeeds is in not worrying about. I think what held this movie down is the fact that this really happened.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those things where the biographical nature of the movie takes away from it because now like you're forced to like gotta put in, where they came from and the people at home and everything and all this stuff that you're going to build around it. Whereas if you just started this movie with these guys already fishing and this storm happens and they gotta get a race against time to get home now.
Yeah.
And through the character beats of these guys interacting on the ship, we're learning about their life back at home.
Right,
Much
exactly.
more interesting.
Exactly.
Yep. Because now you're
Like, and
learning what
then
they're fighting for
right,
instead of
and
just
those
seeing all this random buildup.
right, then those relationships back home become the thing that's driving their relationships on the boat. And like now all of a sudden you have like some story here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you have
Now we've
some
got something.
synergy,
And you make that
like
a
things
hundred
are
hundred
working
minutes.
together.
Yeah. 100-minute
Yeah,
movie
right.
right there.
And the movie has no business being 130 minutes long. Like
Oh yeah, no,
zero business
yeah,
being 130
absolutely.
minutes long.
That's an insane runtime for that movie. It really pads itself out. But yeah, I think that definitely was probably the biggest hindrance for that movie was that they were a slave to having to adhere to the biographical nature of it
Yeah,
because this is something that happened in real life. Whereas like I don't think every single thing that happened in real life really needs to be turned into a movie. Like that was a situation where you could have looked at that and been like, "Oh shit, that's crazy. I'm going to make a movie about that, but not adhere to anything that actually happened. Like I'm just going to make my own
yeah,
fiction movie that just takes elements from that crazy larger than life thing that happened."
right. But I think the problem you run into though is that, especially because this is something that at the time this movie came out, like happened very recently. The fact that it's autobiographical and it's about like real life people is like what sells it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's really what they're after. Like that's why they make the movie probably to begin with, is because they say, oh, people will watch this and people will care about this just because they were real people. The story doesn't need to be good. We're agreeing. Like I just think it's like more of a crutch that they know is a crutch, and they're just like,
Yeah.
well, but this movie will make money, so let's do
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Exactly. They're just like, we know, but hey, that's the nature of the business sometimes. I will say I'm going to continue again to play
Yeah.
devil's advocate because one of the better things that
Sorry,
we
this has really turned into just an hour of me like shitting on this movie. That's
but
not
I
how
mean,
I
hey,
wanted it to go.
as I don't care. That's totally fine. I mean, that's how you felt about the movie by all means. I mean, I'm wasn't the biggest fan of it either. But I want to at least give credit where it's due.
Yeah, yeah,
I will say that the special effects at the end there too, that big wave that they have to go over and everything,
yeah. It was pretty cool.
that stuff it held up for 2000 for that being from 2000. It didn't look bad at all. Like that
No,
still
it
held
looked
up
really good.
pretty
Yeah,
pretty solid for that.
it
So that's
looked better than some of the CGI in Titanic.
a
Like it's so like yeah. I mean, I think it looked pretty good. Yeah,
yeah, it definitely showed that we were I it's funny that like it looks so like pedestrian to compared to what's done today. But I really feel like those late 90s, early 2000s, even though they were like still figuring out the format, I still feel like that was the heyday of special effects because like they
yeah,
used special effects, but they use it in the way that it should be used today, where it's you should only be using it if you can't physically manifest it in the real world. Whereas today, you look
yeah.
at a Marvel movie and they're like, all right, the scene is you're in a room. It's all green screen. It's like, what? Why?
Right, right. I think like the real litmus test for me is if I watch your movie with heavy visual effects and at no point do I say, "Man, that CGI looks horrible," then I think you did it. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think you have good effects. You know, whether you did that by building practical things, a mix of CGI and practical things, or just CGI, as long as there isn't a point where I'm totally taken out of the movie because I'm thinking that looks ridiculous and obviously generated by a computer,
Yeah.
then I think you win. And I would say that this movie definitely passes that test.
Definitely did. Well, I think what helped them back then is that since they were learning, what were the limits of it back then, they spent their time getting it right. Whereas today, they'll be like, hey, the movie comes out December, get it done. And you're like, that's like 7 months from now. They're just
Yeah,
like,
and I
yeah, I don't
mean,
care.
dude, you know the thing that really freaks me out about this?
What?
Part of the reason they do that is because they know they can clean it up when they're going to release it on like streaming and
Yeah,
DVD or whatever else they're going to release it on. They know in advance that they're not going to release the theatrical cut. So they're just like, just get something into theaters. Whoever's seeing it in theaters is going to see it no matter what. It doesn't matter. Like,
yeah, that's definitely a slippery slope and something that
it's
I
like,
do not like.
it's a thing that happens with video games all the
Yeah,
time these
yeah, they do
days
it a
too,
lot with
where
video
like
games too. Because
they're
they'll just
just
like, we'll
like
just patch
releasing
it.
something to release it and they know they're going to fix it and build on it as they
Yeah.
go.
Looking at you, Bethesda.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's definitely a crutch that I do not care for in today's entertainment.
Yeah, it's pretty lame.
Yeah, it is very lame. I think the last thing that I really have left to comment on, which isn't really even a thing about this movie, it was just something
Okay.
that we said we were going to talk about when I hyped it up last week, and I haven't heard it out from you yet. How
Oh, okay.
many how many that guys were in this movie, Jim?
Oh, okay.
There were a
Um,
lot of that guys in this movie. A couple of that
there
girls too. I
was.
forgot Karen Allen was in this.
She's definitely a that
I
girl
was like,
because
dude,
I
is that
would
Marion Ravenwood?
right, because I'll never remember her name as Karen Allen off the top of my head, but as soon as I see her, I'm like, oh, that's the lady from Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
That's who that is.
Well, all right.
Um,
So you got Karen Allen right there. We already
the
said
guy,
the guy from Shawshank.
right, the warden from Shawshank,
Yeah.
definitely a
So
that
we
guy.
got we
And I
got
guess
two
the
right. We
line
got
is like, if I don't know your name, you're a that guy, right? So
exactly.
John
Yeah.
C. Riley doesn't count. Mark
Yeah. He
Wahlberg
doesn't.
doesn't count.
Not.
Um,
So we're
the
at two, right?
guy, the guy who George Clooney like goes to meet and like has to convince to take the extra spot that opened up on the boat. Totally a that guy. I do not
Yep.
know his name. I know I've seen
William,
him in a million
the
movies.
one that John C. Riley has like the beef with, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. William Fickner is his name.
Sure. Yeah. I
Yep.
just
He
know
was.
he's in a lot of movies in
Yep.
like the
He's in.
90s and
Yeah. That
around that
guy's in
time.
so much stuff. Yep. Number. Yeah. All right. So we got three. We got three.
Um I don't know his name, but the guy who plays
Bugsy.
Shooter McGavern
Oh yeah.
is
Yeah.
the weatherman.
Yep. Yep. There we go. Chris. That guy. That guy. We're up to four.
The guy. Yeah, and who's Bugsy? I don't even know who Bugsy is.
Bugsy. He's in a lot of stuff too. His name's John Hawkes.
Oh yeah, I've
Yeah,
definitely heard
he's
that
in a
name
lot of
before.
movies. He's in
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. We're at five. We're at five.
Okay,
I
hold
picked up
on. Let me
one.
think about
Okay,
this.
there's one more that I really noticed.
Okay, let me think
If
for a
you got him.
second. Who's the mom on the boat with the warden from Shawshank and Karen Allen? She
Oh,
looked
her,
kind of
I
familiar.
don't remember. What's funny is
I'm
I was
trying to
way off.
think.
I was way
Oh, go
off because
ahead.
I could have sworn that the girl, the woman back that Bugsy like meets, I could have sworn it was character actress Margot Martindale.
I
But
don't think it
but it
was. I
wasn't. No,
don't think
it
it
wasn't. When
was.
I was watching it, I was like, oh, it's not her. I could have sworn it was her, but it was not her.
It's
Um,
enough. It's honestly astonishing to me that she didn't get that part, honestly.
yeah, right.
She that seems like it's got Margot Martindale written all over it.
That would have been a perfect movie for her. But the last person that I
Yeah,
had
who
picked
else
up
did you
on
get? Yeah, let me hear it.
is Michael Ironside, the guy from Starship Troopers that George Clooney he's one of the other shipping guys. I think he works on the
Oh.
boat that the girl that he talks to all the time is on. But he's another one of the guys there that he either like collects his paycheck from or works on one of the other ships.
Yeah,
But
who was the guy who owned the boat? That guy was pretty well, I'm trying to remember if
I
I've
think that's him, Michael Ironside, that he owns the
Yeah,
boat or
yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. And he's the guy who like loses all of his arms and shit that trains Rico in Starship Troopers.
Right. So hold
Yeah.
on. I'm also looking I'm trying to see who this lady is.
What who's
The
on
mom
the small vessel?
Yes. Yes, the mom on the boat on the smaller vessel. I
Yeah.
believe she's Matt Damon's mom in Ocean's 12. I'm pretty sure.
Oh really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's her and she's in like a couple of other things. I think she makes
There we go.
the
There is a huge eclectic cast in this movie. So many that guys and that gals that would just go on
Yeah.
to litter cinema for the next 20 years. And
Oh,
in
dude,
addition,
you know what else
what?
she's in from pretty
What?
recently? She's in an episode of Poker Face. And as soon as I saw that, I can tell you which one it is. It's the one with the horror movie, like the LPN, I think it
Oh,
was
okay.
called.
You go. So
Yeah,
yeah,
she
so
plays the CEO in that episode of Poker Face.
so
She's definitely a that girl.
we got
Definitely.
a huge cast of that guy and that gal, actors and
Oh,
actresses.
and she's in Secession. Yeah, she's
So
definitely a that girl.
she's ripping it up in the TV realm right now.
Yes, her name's
Is
Cherry Jones.
what a fucking name right there.
Yeah.
Cherry Jones. It was like, sweetheart, you either got to be an actress or a porn star. So
Yeah, no in between.
No in between on that name.
And then so that's all you have for that. I think that's it,
Yeah,
right?
that
For
was
the
like
that
seven
guys.
people. That's like one of the
That's a
biggest.
pretty yeah.
That's one of the biggest collections of that guys I've ever heard in a single movie,
That's a pretty astonishing. Yeah, that's
right?
a lot.
And that's not even counting your three A-listers in George Clooney, Wahlberg, and Diane Lane. But all right, do you have anything else to add to the
I
perfect storm, this
I think
perfect amalgamation?
I've had about enough of it.
He's had about enough of that. So, given everything that Jim has just said over the last hour, I am gloriously waiting what your final rating is going to be for that. I think this one is going to be a fun movie to see where it's going to land on the rating scale
Yeah.
with the rest of these
I'm
movies. So, Jim, The Perfect Storm, what is your final rating?
I'm giving it a 1.5.
Oh man,
Yeah, it's real low, dude. I was not a
he
fan.
made it so low. And I Jim, you've been waiting so long to wonder what movie is going to do worse than the Rugrats movie. And
Yeah.
is it going to be The Perfect Storm?
I hope so.
So for all you guys and dolls out there who were wondering, the Rugrats movie finished at a 4 out of 10. Right now, with Jim's rating, The Perfect Storm is at a 1 out of 10. So it would need.
No, I said 1.5, right?
Oh, you said no, you said one.
Did I
You
say
give it.
1?
I thought I heard one. All right,
I
so you give
think
it
I
a
said
one.
1.5.
All
I'm
right, maybe
giving
I
it a
just missed.
1.5. Yeah.
Maybe I just missed the 0.5. But all right, he gave it a 1.5, which means that anything lower than a 3 out of me, and this movie's coming in lower than the Rugrats.
Yeah. I really hope it does.
All right. My final rating for The Perfect Storm. So I love, we constantly always talk about how I have my Excel sheet where I always wrote my movies down.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the first times that I'd actually gone back to change that one when I went to look before doing this podcast because I wanted to see what I gave it when I was a kid versus how I felt about it now.
Right.
And I think you're going to crack up at this. So, what did you think I gave this movie after my great date back in the year 2000?
I'm going to say you gave it a perfect score.
Close to it. I gave it 4 stars as a kid.
Okay, yeah. 4
Yeah,
out of 5,
11.
yeah.
Yeah, 11-year-old TJ was all about this. 34-year-old TJ, not so much. I would give this movie, after everything we talked about, I would agree. This movie is a wildly does not live up to its premise. And I think that's really what it boils down to when I give my scores. I am going to give this a disappointing 2 stars.
2.
2 stars.
Okay, yeah. So
A
yeah, we're kind of on the
disappointing
same
two
page, right?
stars. Yeah, so like obviously in here I've played devil's advocate and there are stuff about this movie that I do like. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the movie does not deliver on the premise. It doesn't deliver on the expectation that I paid a ticket for this movie. Like what I
Yeah.
wanted out of this movie, you only gave me in the last half. And by then you've beaten me over the head to the point that all the stuff that I wanted for this, I don't even care about by the time you've given
Yeah.
it to me because you've
Fair
lost
enough.
all my goodwill.
So then
So
we have it at a 3.5.
yeah, it was
It's
disappointing. Yeah.
officially lower than
So
Rugrats.
yeah.
That's
So
amazing. I'm
so
so happy.
yeah, so The Perfect Storm comes in with a 3.5 out of 10. The lowest rated movie right now in our podcast
Deservedly so,
rankings.
in my
This
opinion.
is the low. Heather is not going to like this episode.
Yeah.
The Perfect Storm with a 3.5 all the way settles in right behind the Rugrats movie with a 4-star ranking. But yeah, that sounds about right for this movie. It's the nature of the beast. Like
Yeah.
should have been a
I
better
mean,
movie.
so like I'm still interested to see what movie that I don't think deserves to be below Rugrats ends up below Rugrats, but this is not it. Like they're both really bad movies in my opinion.
He's like, I was waiting for a movie to go lower it, but this one absolutely deserves to be lower than it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, it hey, is the nature of the beast. It happens. Sorry, George. Sorry, Mark. Sorry, Wolfgang. Don't worry. Wolfgang will get his due. we'll be coming back to him down the road with an absolutely stellar movie. But that will be for a much later date. Jim, do you want to take a guess at what next week's episode is going to be?
Can I just throw one more thing out there that I forgot about?
Absolutely. You can throw one
This
more thing in there. This we'll just call
this
this the
movie,
epilogue.
yeah, this movie had one of the better roll credits moments of all time.
Okay. How so?
You know what I mean when I say a roll credits moment, right?
What when they say the name of the movie, right?
Yes, when they say the
Yeah.
title of the movie, whenever we hear that, we always just say
Just
roll
go roll
credits.
credits. Yep. I still do that to this
And-
day, and it's taken
yeah,
Heather so long to get used to it. She hates it every
yes,
time I do
yeah.
it.
So this is one of the better roll credits moments in that I can remember, where Shooter McGavin is like running down like the three storms hitting each other, and then it cuts to the boat, and he's like, "The perfect storm."
We really should be adding
Yeah,
the
it
Hall of
should be a
Fame roll
it should be a
credits.
thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
the roll credits segment here. That's a good call, Jim. That's you're just coming up with hot ticket items
Hey,
all
I
night.
mean, I can't help it.
But yes,
It
that
just flows out of
yeah,
me.
that is an all-star roll credits moment right there. I that's probably one of my favorite things watching movies a lot of times too is waiting like to see if they're going to say the title in the movie
Yeah.
so I
It's
can
also
always just
like,
go roll credits.
yeah, and you like this might be a part to edit out, but if we're gonna be doing it as like a thing we highlight, it should probably be what you play as the intro of the episode. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
yeah,
So
yeah,
like
that's a
if
good
this
one.
episode intro would be Shooter McGavin like doing
Go
his
ahead.
speech, and he ends on the words "the perfect storm," and then we like roll right into it.
Then
You
we
know what I
come
mean?
in. Dude,
And
you are
then we can
just
just talk about that like at the beginning of the episode. You know what I
yeah.
mean? That's kind of like how we ease our way into it.
Dude, you are just on fire tonight.
I mean, what can I
God,
say? I don't know.
someone got to put this guy out. You can take us right to the top with thoughts like that. But that is great. No, I do like that. That is glorious. So you heard it here, people. We're coming up in real time. Great thoughts for the podcast. I love it. But all right, we're circling back. Jim, take a guess. Any ideas on next week's movie? Should I give a hint as always?
So, give me the like the release date, I suppose. Like
So
what
it
the
was
month and year?
I think this movie was 2 weeks after it was still July. So
Okay,
it was a summer movie.
so
It was two
July of
weeks
2000.
after the Perfect Storm about. And it's a comedy.
Oh, it's a comedy
Yeah, we're
in
switching up genres, man. We're gonna
2000.
dive into a comedy right here. Oop.
All right, give me a hint other than that it's a comedy.
We in high school, you, me, and Ryan quoted this movie religiously. And I'll give a quote that
Oh, hold on.
we
Don't
okay,
say
okay,
anything
okay,
yet.
okay, okay,
I
okay,
think I got it.
okay.
Is it Saving Silverman?
No, it is not Saving
Oh,
Silverman, but that would have been a good guess because we
okay.
quoted that movie also religiously. But all right, so I'll throw a quote at you, a line that
Yeah.
we used to say all the time. Because girl wears Prada shoes.
Oh, scary movie.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Next week we will be diving into the 2000 parody film Scary Movie, an absolute
Nice.
classic, if I do say so myself.
Yeah. Total classic. Yeah. This is another cool franchise to dig into too.
Yeah, and this is one that I think for the most part I saw all the good ones in theaters, so we'll be diving into the
I
first
for
three.
these spoof movies, I saw way more than the good ones in theaters.
That
So
is true. We watched a lot of questionable ones from two of the writers from Scary Movie who would go on to make the absolute bottom of the barrel of
yeah,
spoof movies. And
did they write Vampires Suck? Because I was still
I'm
watching them when that one came out.
I'm sure they did. Yeah, you want to talk about your date movies, your epic movies, your Meet the Spartans. Now those were spoof movies.
Yeah. But
But yes,
anyway, let's
next
save some of that for next week. Yeah,
yeah,
let's
save
not get too
some of
into it.
that good stuff. You can't be using all that good juice for next week. But that'll be next week's episode. Join us back here when we dive into the absolute classic that was Scary Movie. But that will do it for all of us here in this episode. As always, we turn to Jim for some great words of wisdom at the end. Jim, what do you got for us this week?
if you're thinking about watching The Perfect Storm, just remember that you're steaming into a bomb. Turn around, for Christ's sake.
That's pretty good right there.
It's not bad,
John,
right? That's the
that's good.
first like
Yeah,
quote that I pulled out of the
that's
movie. It's like,
that's a good
I
one. I
think,
like
from a
that.
kind of recognizable part. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. For anyone who suffered through Perfect Storm, they might pick up on that one. That was a good one,
Yeah.
Jim. With good words of wisdom to send you home with tonight. And as always, we will see you at the movies.